Hi everyone, and welcome to Dennis Deep Cuts, the 35th installment of this fine YouTube series. Today, we're talking about bands and artists that only put out one record. Just that one record. Let's see what happens. If there's something I learned over the years of playing in numerous bands, is that it's really difficult to keep everyone's egos in check, everyone's ideas in line, and everyone's vision of what your band and your music should be like cohesive. There's so many bands and artists throughout the years that they got together and they formed that little magic moment in time, and then that didn't work out and bands scattered. And there's so much squandered potential. There's so many what if and it could have been. And today we're going to touch upon that. I'm going to talk about 10 records that are, I guess now most of them are cult records, but I'm sure that at the time of their release or after their release, it must have been immensely frustrating. You know, the band breaks up, you put out this one record and then the band breaks up. And I guess in a lot of instances, in a lot of cases, maybe people didn't think much of it. Just time to move on in life. So let's see what it is. I got 10 records for you. They're more of the cult phenomenon status, but there's some really cool music in here, so let's do it. So the first record I want to show you is the Young Marble Giants of Cardiff in Wales. They released their only record, Colossal Youth, in 1980, and they had some EPs out, but this is their one and only record. They were actually, the record actually placed at number 3 on the British indie chart. See, it wasn't like a complete failure when it came out, but the band broke up and that was that. They did some reunions in the 2000s and since then they haven't played. The record is super interesting. It's really different from a lot of stuff that was going on at the time. It's super minimalistic. It's guitar, bass, and vocals, and that's it. A couple of songs, there's bass and keyboards and vocals. There are very little drums, and if there are drums, there's like a really sparse drum machine that's on hand claps, and it's just there's no overdub, basically. And it's a super interesting record, and it's very, very different from most stuff that you heard. And it's also one of those records that went on to be pretty influential, and people cite the Young Marble Giants as an influence, maybe especially with guitar playing. So yeah, it's a pretty kick-ass record. So the next record I want to talk to you about is the beautiful Or record by Alexander Skip Spence. Alexander Spence was from Ontario, Canada, and he was a bit of a major player in the early psychedelic scene of the West Coast in the United States. He was in an early version of Quicksilver Messenger Service. He played drums on the first Jefferson Airplane record, and he was, for a short minute, he was also in Buffalo Springfield before he helped form Moby Grape. While Moby Grape were recording their second record, he did drugs. He went into some sort of psychosis, and he tried to kill one of the members in the band with an axe, which meant he got institutionalized for 6 months. And the story goes that when he got released, he drove his motorcycle to Nashville in his pajama, and he recorded this record by himself. It's only him. And it's the only solo record he put out. He was in a bunch of other records, in a bunch of other bands, but it's his only solo record. And a lot of mental health issues, a lot of drug and alcohol related issues kind of prevented him from doing anything else in his life. And he kind of faded away from music. He was sort of involved in Moby Grape his entire life, or they were involved with him. They had some of his songs on the record, and he occasionally would play with them, but he died in the late 90s at the age of 53. And it's one of those what could have been if only, you know, he didn't do drugs or was a part of that world, or dealt with mental health issues. Because this record is absolutely beautiful. I mean, it's regarded as a folk psych masterpiece, more or less, and I think the record is a little bit all over the place, but in a really cool way. And it would have been fantastic to hear Alex and Spence put out more records like this. But there's also something about the legendary status of this guy that kind of went bonkers and put out one solo record where he plays all the instruments himself. There's something to that as well. It's a better story than someone that just, oh, I'm just going to put out some good, decent records and live my life. But yeah, check it out. It's a super cool record. It's very different. All right, this next record is actually something completely different. I'm going to talk about the Jilted John record, True Love Stories from 1978. And this is a novelty record. A British comedian called GrahamFellows had a couple of songs that he recorded and put out a 7-inch as Jilted John, which is like a persona, this teenager that's very unlucky in love. And he sings about like the fact that his girlfriend left him for someone named Gordon, and Gordon is of course a moron. It got played on, John Peel played it and said this with some good backing, this could be a real thing. So EMI signed it, and they put up the True Love Stories record, which is Jilted John foray into, you know, romance and unhappy love. And it's a super cool power pop. I mean, not really punk, but like kind of driving power pop. Great songs, great melodies, and it's a really cool, weird novelty record. I really like this record. It's super weird and super cool, and yeah, this is it. GrahamFellows did this Jilted John record, and that was it. And then he went on to become an actor and do other stuff in life. But Jilted John is definitely worth checking out if you like your pop music, tells some punch to it. This is a really cool record. And speaking of novelty records, the Monks, Black Tie Monks from 1966. The Monks were 5 GIs from America's station in West Germany in the 60s. And they started playing music together, and they had like a regular like rock band, and then they transformed into the Monks, and they shaved the top of their heads, and they wore black robes, and they wanted to do different type of music. So it's super rhythmical. Everything is in service of the beat. There's not a whole lot of riffage. It's just like everything goes on the beat, and they have a electric banjo that also plays on the beat. And this is one of my favorite 60s garage rock records of all time. The International Noise Conspiracy actually recorded Shut Up for a Monks tribute CD that came out ages ago. And people say this is a precursor to punk, which I could see that. It's so propulsive and it's so weird, and he's singing, he's like he's kind of screaming on top of the music. It got released by Polydor in Germany. The American Polydor was like, we're not touching this. This is insane. And yeah, they put out this one record. Then they wanted to change the sound, become a bit more conventional, and they put out like a 7-inch that's not that great. But if you ever find a copy of this record, you need to check it out because it's one of the best 60s garage punk records of all time. Last time when I did an episode about this, I jokingly referred to the Washington, D.C. scene, that I could probably make a whole episode about just Washington, D.C. punk and hardcore and bands that just put out one record. It seemed like that's all they did. They put out one record. There's no longevity to these bands. And I'm going to talk about another DC hardcore band, Black Market Baby. Black Market Baby wasn't really part of like the Discord scene. They were like more original punks. They're a bit older. Definitely not a straight edge type of band, and they're fantastic. They put out a couple of 7 inches in 1981, and then they put out this record in 1983, Census Offerings. And I would go as far as say this is a stone cold punk hardcore classic. It's such a phenomenal record. In 1986, Ian from, of course, Minor Threat and Fugazi went into the studio to record what would become the follow-up. It never materialized. I mean, it got released, 6 songs got released on compilation a couple of years later, but by that time they were long gone and broken up. So they only put out this one record. And it's one of those deals where, like, what could have been, but they only played regionally. According to themselves, there was massive amounts of alcohol, and there were so many lineup changes that it was hard to keep track. And it's just one of those bands, like, if they would have their shit together a little bit more, maybe people talk about them in the same reverence that they talk about the other DC hardcore bands. I think this is a little bit of a forgotten gem. I think it's a full-on classic hardcore album that doesn't really get the love that it deserves. Black Market Baby, it could have been. Let's head over to Edinburgh in Scotland and talk about Joseph K and their one and only record, The Only Fun in Town. Joseph K started in the late 70s as kind of a punk / post-punk band, and they got signed to Postcard Records, and they put out a couple of 7 inches, and then they actually went and recorded their first full-length record. It was called Sorry for Laughing, but they were so displeased with the result that they shelved it. They said, we're not releasing this. And then they went and recorded this record. It came out in 1981, and then they broke up. You know, the first record that they recorded, Sorry for Laughing, came out in the 90s. You can check that out. I mean, they weren't happy with the way it sounded. This record's great. It's funky, cool, rhythmical post-punk. Very influential. A lot of people talk about this as a very influential record, and when you listen to it, it's really easy to understand. I'm not going to do a playlist. All these records are readily available on streaming services, or just go buy the records. I mean, most of these records have been re-released, or you'll find them if you want to. But yeah, check out Joseph K. Great. In the early 2000s, talked about this on another episode, maybe the episode where, yes, I did talk about this on the episode bands that only pull out one great record. In the early 2000s, Denmark, specifically Copenhagen, had a really fantastic punk and hardcore scene. There were so many good bands coming out of the woodwork. I talked about John Wastener's record last time. And today I'm going to talk about another record that's connected, because Andy Peter that played in Andy Peterson's Army in John Wastener's also played in No Hope for the Kids. No Hope for the Kids put out this record in 2003. Their one and only record. They got 2 7 inches out, I think. And as I said, Peter, that was in Young Wastener's, Andy Peterson's Army, Gula Angweb, also played on this record. And also you have Casper, that was in Asbest and Night Fever, and Death Token. And this is a super cool, catchy punk rock record from the early 2000s. Rainy Day is a complete stone cold classic. The whole record deals with war and destruction, and it's amazing. And one of the part of that early Copenhagen, early 2000s punk scene, and there's so much good stuff in that scene that's worth checking out. And the No Hope for the Kids work is no exception. And if you find it, you should check it out, because this is a really, really great punk rock album. So I thought to myself that I wanted to include some metal on the list. But when I looked at bands that I thought only put out one record, I was like, oh wait, they put out another record in 2002 and then one in 2010, and they got back together and they're at it. Um, Metal is really good at that, and also the metal scene is really good at checking out, you know, the reunion records and the later era records. While punks have a tendency to be like, I only like the first two records. Metal people, in that sense, have way more of an open mind, where people are like, if you like Creator, you're gonna buy the new Creator record. You're not only gonna talk about the Flag of Hate or something like that, or Pleasure to Kill. But I did find a band that only put out one record. I'm talking about one of my favorite metal records of all time, Repulsion, the record Horrified. Repulsion was from Flint, Michigan, and started in the early 80s. They put out some demos, and they recorded this record, Slaughter of the Innocent, in 1986, and it was supposed to come out on some American label, and it never happened. And in 1988, they broke up. And in 1989, the members of gore metal grindcore band Carcass actually put this record out as Horrified instead of The Slaughter of the Innocent. And this is one of those, I feel that it's a very groundbreaking metal record because it's so fast and it's so raw, and it has that element of like, when this came out, like people were like, I've never heard anything like it. And to this day, the breakneck speed and the aggression of this record really holds up. And it's I would say it's a metal classic. Tried and true, metal classic record. Repulsion are back together, of course, and playing shows. So I wouldn't be surprised if one of these days there's like a new Repulsion record coming out. And then their inclusion in this list will be null and void. But as of now, they only have this one record out, and it's a stone cold classic. Of course, if you like gory grindcore. And who doesn't? Who doesn't? All right, two more records to go, and here we have Scratch Acid from Austin, Texas. They're a band from 1982 to 1987. They put out some 12 inches and this one full-length record, Just Keep Eating. They're great. It's noisy, violent, fucked up music. It's like an American hardcore version of like The Birthday Party or something like that. Of course, they're well known because David Yao and David Sims went on to form the Jesus Lizard, who was like true pioneers in Angular noise rock, also an amazing band. And the drummer Ray played in a bunch of cool bands like Ministry and Lard, and also one of my favorite bands, the Big Boys. This record is fantastic. Yeah, that's it. Scratch Acid, fantastic. You love noise rock, don't you? If not, why are you watching this channel? Yep. All right, so final record of the day, also from Edinburgh, Scotland, is Scars with the record Arthur from 1981. I don't know a lot about this band. They put out a couple of 7 inches before this album. They were more punk than post-punk. And then they put this record out, and then they disappeared without a trace. And it's weird. This record is fantastic. It's post-punk in the vein of like maybe Echo the Bunnymen, maybe early U2, that like very percussive, driving, punky post-punk. But no one cared. I mean, this record, you can find it cheap everywhere. It's not like, it's not one of those like, it goes for hundreds of bucks. It goes for $10 maybe. But it's a great record. I think I know what went wrong, because they used to look like a post-punk type of band. And then for reasons that are beyond me and beyond anyone, they decided to go for a slightly different image. on this record. And I think when you see the artwork and you see the photo of them back here, you're thinking, oh, it's maybe some new romantic sort of synth pop, and it's not at all. It's a really, really good record that really deserves to become a cult record. Yeah, and there you have it. Like what maybe a lot of this, like a lot of this is like poor choices, maybe the wrong label, or maybe the wrong image on the album, or you went on a tour and it didn't work out, so you broke up. There's all these parameters as to why a band just puts out one record, and it's something fascinating about that, and it's something fascinating about the fact that all these records are great, and as an artist, I mean, yeah, of course you can peak on your first album, but I did not peak on my first album at all. And most of us, we learn as we go, and we become better singers, better songwriters, everything, better players. So what could have been, we will never know. What's your favorite artist or band that only put out one record and that record just blows your mind? Tell me in the comments section below. Until next time, stay wild, my friends, and like, share, subscribe, blah, 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 blah. Bye-bye.